I'm going to stop you right there, ma'am. This isn't a charity. We don't sell cheap knockoffs. Maybe you'd feel more comfortable at the thrift shop 2 blocks down. The words, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the quiet elegance of Leclerc fine jewelry like a blade. Dorothy Harris, 78 years old and wearing her faded blue coat and a simple hand-knit scarf, stood motionless for a moment. Her soft gray curls framed a face that radiated quiet dignity, but the sting of the young saleswoman's voice lingered. The woman, Chloe, barely in her 20s, stood behind a gleaming glass counter. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently against the display as she stared at Dorothy with a forced smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Around her neck hung a delicate gold chain worth more than what most people made in a month. Chloe didn't even bother to lower her voice for discretion. That necklace you're eyeing is $25,000. Ma'am, Chloe continued, tone dripping with condescension. I highly doubt you're our usual clientele. Gasps came from a nearby customer. Unbelievable, whispered a woman clutching a designer purse. Chloe smirked, turning slightly to her colleague at the register. You see what I mean? They just wander in, sometimes thinking they belong. Dorothy's eyes stayed fixed on the sapphire necklace inside the case. Calmly, she reached into her worn handbag, her fingers brushing against an old silver coin she kept for strength. I understand, she said softly. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Chloe gave an exaggerated sigh and waved her off. Sure, take all the time you need, Grandma. But window shopping ends at the window. Dorothy said nothing. She turned, back straight, shoulders squared, and walked toward the door. The cold air of the outside street greeted her like an old friend as the door's luxurious chime echoed behind her. She stepped into the flow of pedestrians and let the noise of the street carry her away. She thought back to where it all began. Chloe twirled a lock of her perfectly styled hair and scoffed. Can you believe her nerve? She whispered loudly to her coworker. Ethan, the assistant manager. Ethan, a sharply dressed man in his early 30s, chuckled as he leaned against the glass counter. Some people just don't know their place. Ethan replied smugly. Honestly, I don't know why security let her in to begin with. Chloe nodded, straightening a row of velvet jewelry stands. Probably thought she was lost, or maybe looking for the bathroom. Their laughter was cut short by the arrival of a young employee, Emma, holding a small box. She hesitated, glancing at the door where Dorothy had just exited. You didn't have to be so rude, Emma said quietly. Chloe rolled her eyes. Please, Monsieur Tun. I saved her the embarrassment of getting laughed out of here when she saw the prices. Ethan crossed his arms, smirking. You know, management expects us to maintain the brand image. We don't want just anyone parading around pretending they can buy from us. A customer approached the counter, oblivious to the conversation. Chloe immediately switched to her fake professional tone. Good afternoon, sir. Are you interested in our exclusive diamond collection? As the door chimed again with a new customer, Chloe whispered to Ethan, I'll bet you $50 the old lady never comes back. Ethan laughed. We won. No us he were mountain. The minutes dragged on. Chloe and Ethan continued their shallow banter, occasionally pausing to flash their trained smiles at wealthy clientele. Emma silently polished the jewelry cases, her gaze flicking anxiously toward the door. Every time the bell rang, Chloe snickered. Not her. Finally, as the store settled into its afternoon rhythm, Ethan leaned back and whispered, Told you. She's gone for good. Chloe grinned. Like I said, window shopping ends at the window. The glass door chimed softly as yet another customer exited. Chloe tilted her head mockingly at Emma. Told you. Vanished. Poof. So. Emma didn't respond. She continued polishing the glass display, casting worried glances at the door. Ethan adjusted his designer cufflinks and checked his watch. Time's up. Let's get back to real customers. Just as he spoke, the doorbell rang again. Everyone's heads turned. Instead of Dorothy, a pair of sharply dressed men in dark suits stepped inside, scanning the room before quietly taking positions near the entrance. Chloe frowned slightly but quickly dismissed them as ordinary security detail. Minutes later, a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and out stepped Dorothy Harris. But this time, she was no longer just a frail old woman. Her back was straight, her movements confident, and her attire subtly elegant, a tailored navy coat and polished leather shoes. Emma froze mid-polish. Chloe and Ethan stared, their smirks fading into confusion. Dorothy calmly approached the doors, the suited men instantly falling in behind her. The chime of the door echoed through the store as she entered, her gaze steady. "Isn't that?" Beza went Sansa, Chloe whispered nervously. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "No way. That can't be her." Dorothy didn't acknowledge them. Instead, she stood by the center counter, silently waiting as the room's energy shifted. The young sales assistant beside Chloe stepped back instinctively. Even customers began to glance curiously at the poised woman with the unmistakable aura of authority. As she stood quietly just inside the entrance of Leclerc Fine Jewelry, surrounded by the cold stares and opulent displays, Dorothy allowed her thoughts to drift back for a fleeting moment to where it all began. Dorothy's memories unfolded like the delicate petals of a long-forgotten rose. Born in 1944 in rural Georgia, she was the youngest of 5 children in a family that barely scraped by. Her father worked tirelessly in the fields, while her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families on the other side of town. From a young age, Dorothy understood the bitter sting of exclusion. As a child, she would press her small hands and wide eyes against the windows of jewelry shops, mesmerized by the dazzling displays she could never afford. One day, she whispered to herself, "I'll belong in there." School was a privilege, not a guarantee. Dorothy walked miles each day to attend a segregated school with broken desks and worn books. But inside those tattered pages, she discovered her passion for learning. Her favorite subject was mathematics, where precision and symmetry reminded her of the sparkling jewelry she admired. At just 14, Dorothy began working evenings after school at a small local jewelry repair shop. Mr. Alvarez, the kind but stern owner, noticed the quiet determination in her eyes. He taught her how to polish gemstones, mend broken glass, and eventually, how to design. "There's an art to this," he would say. "It's not about the price tag. It's about craftsmanship and care." Dorothy absorbed every lesson like a sponge, her small hands growing skilled with the tiny tools of the trade. The shop became her sanctuary, a world where talent mattered more than appearance or background. Her family remained skeptical. Jewelry, her older brother scoffed. "You'll never make a living from that." But Dorothy remained undeterred. The fire inside her burned brighter with every doubter. As she stood now, decades later, outside Leclerc Fine Jewelry, the weight of those early years grounded her resolve. She had never forgotten the girl who once dreamed through a shop window. Now, standing once again at the doorstep of the same kind of place that once rejected her, the images in Dorothy's mind shifted from the modest jewelry shop to the bustling streets of New York City. At 18, with nothing but a small suitcase and her dream, she boarded a crowded bus headed north. The city greeted her with cold winters and colder shoulders. Her first job was as a night cleaner in a downtown department store. She scrubbed floors by moonlight and studied gemstone design by day. Borrowing worn library books and sketching designs on scraps of paper, rejections came like clockwork. Boutique owners dismissed her quietly or scoffed at her sketches. "We don't take unsolicited designs," they said, or worse. "You don't look like someone who belongs in this industry." But Dorothy refused to break. She saved every penny, skipped meals, and worked extra shifts just to afford basic materials to create her first handmade pieces. A stroke of luck came when an elderly customer at the department store noticed her wearing one of her own designs, a delicate silver bracelet with a single aquamarine stone. "Where did you buy that?" the woman asked. "I made it," Dorothy replied nervously. The woman, a socialite with connections, introduced Dorothy to a small local gallery. That first showcase led to more commissions, and soon her reputation for craftsmanship and unique designs spread quietly but steadily. Dorothy spent the next 2 decades building her name. She opened a modest studio in Brooklyn where she trained underappreciated artisans, many from disadvantaged backgrounds like herself. Her pieces, a fusion of bold lines and intricate detailing, earned her respect in the niche circles of fine jewelry. Despite success, Dorothy remained humble and cautious. She avoided flashy headlines and chose integrity over shortcuts. For her, jewelry wasn't just decoration, it was identity, history, resilience. By the time she reached her 60s, Dorothy had quietly acquired stakes in several jewelry houses. Some owners never even knew the quiet investor behind the scenes was the woman they would have once ignored at their counters. Her determination had carried her from a farm in Georgia to the pinnacle of the jewelry world. And as she stood now inside Leclerc Fine Jewelry, she knew her toughest test was about to begin. Dorothy's path had been quiet, strategic, and meticulously planned. As she approached retirement age, She made the boldest decision of her life. Leveraging her accumulated shares in silent partnerships, she orchestrated a discreet but decisive acquisition, controlling interest in the prestigious Leclerc fine jewelry chain. Few outside the boardroom knew the name Dorothy Harris. The executives and shareholders simply referred to her as the Harris Group, never imagining the woman behind the title was the soft-spoken designer they had once ignored. With her majority stake secured, Dorothy set her sights on what mattered most, transforming the toxic culture she had witnessed for decades. She insisted on revising hiring practices, launching diversity training programs, and setting up scholarships for aspiring jewelry designers from underrepresented communities. She visited store after store, always anonymously, watching, listening, and taking notes. Employees who were kind, patient, and inclusive were quietly promoted. Those who displayed arrogance or prejudice were swiftly removed. It was her way of balancing the scales. Until now, she had never set foot inside the flagship Leclerc location. The very place she once stared at longingly as a young girl was now hers to command. But today wasn't just about ownership. It was about making a statement. Dorothy had deliberately dressed modestly when she first walked in that morning. The looks, the dismissive comments, the cruel assumption of her worthlessness they had played out just as she suspected. Chloe and Ethan had failed the test spectacularly. The soft chime of the doorbell pulled her back from her thoughts. The suited security team, lawyers, and her personal assistant were already arriving as planned. Emma, the only one who had shown decency, stood nervously behind the counter, her eyes darting between the approaching entourage and the oblivious Chloe and Ethan. Dorothy's heart was steady. Her moment had come. Now one standing once again inside the kind of place that once rejected her. Dorothy smoothed the lapels of her coat and prepared to reveal the truth. The next chapter was about to begin. Inside the bright, pristine interior of Leclerc fine jewelry, Chloe sauntered confidently behind the counter, a smug grin tugging at her lips. She glanced at Ethan, who leaned casually against the polished glass display case, arms crossed. "Well, it's been over half an hour," Chloe whispered with a chuckle. "I knew she wasn't coming back." Ethan smirked. "You owe me that $50. Chloe rolled her eyes and waved him off. Thus later, they continued serving wealthy clients, switching effortlessly between faux charm and whispered mockery. As an elderly gentleman browsed an emerald brooch, Chloe leaned over to Ethan. "This is how the real clientele looks. Not like that thrift store granny from earlier." Ethan laughed softly. "I don't even know why she bothered walking in here. Some people just can't accept their place." Chloe adjusted a diamond pendant on a velvet stand and added, "I mean, did you see that coat? I swear I've donated better to charity bins." A well-dressed woman approached the counter. Chloe immediately straightened and adopted her polished retail persona. "Good afternoon, Mademoiselle Toiturne. May I show you our exclusive sapphire collection?" The woman nodded, and Chloe proceeded to unlock the display with deliberate grace. As the client admired the glittering stones, Chloe shot Ethan a quick, knowing smirk. Minutes passed, the door chime punctuating the calm as customers came and went. Chloe and Ethan remained relaxed, basking in what they considered a normal day at work. "I bet she's wandering the mall trying to scrape together enough for a fake bracelet," Ethan joked quietly. Chloe stifled a laugh behind her manicured hand. Or maybe she finally got the hint and went home. Emma stood silently nearby, polishing the glass with slow, deliberate strokes. She watched them out of the corner of her eye, her expression unreadable. Though she said nothing, her tightened grip on the cloth spoke volumes. The arrogance in Chloe and Ethan grew with each passing moment. They believed they had maintained the brand's image. They believed they had done their job. They had no idea just how spectacularly they had failed. The rhythmic chime of the glass door cut through the quiet murmur of the store. Chloe glanced up mid-sentence and froze. Ethan's smirk faltered. Dorothy Harris stood just inside the entrance. This time, the frail, humble figure had been replaced by a poised woman whose confident posture and calm expression commanded attention. Her posture was steady, and her calm expression immediately silenced the room. Two suited men followed her silently, with another carrying a briefcase. Customers paused, eyeing the unusual procession. Emma gasped softly and instinctively stepped back from the counter. Chloe blinked rapidly, struggling to recover her professional facade. She quickly smoothed her hair and plastered on her well-practiced retail smile. "Welcome back, ma'am," Chloe said, her tone syrupy but laced with confusion. "Can I help you find something today?" Ethan stood a few feet back, arms crossed, watching with thinly veiled annoyance. Dorothy didn't respond immediately. She surveyed the store with a calm, assessing gaze. Slowly, she stepped forward, her polished heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The tall man with the briefcase moved ahead and quietly handed a sealed envelope to Ethan. Ethan frowned as he took it. "What's this?" Dorothy finally spoke, her voice even and composed. "You'll want to read that." Ethan opened the envelope and unfolded the document. His confident expression morphed into disbelief as his eyes scanned the papers. Chloe leaned over to glance and immediately stiffened. It was an official acquisition notice from the Leclerc corporate board. Effective immediately, Dorothy Harris had become the controlling majority owner of the entire Leclerc fine jewelry brand. Chloe's jaw dropped. This economon. This can't be real. Dorothy met her stunned gaze with a serene smile. Oh, but it is. The entire room held its breath as the weight of realization began to settle over the employees and clients alike. The silence in the store stretched painfully. Chloe stared at the document as if hoping the words would vanish. Ethan's confident smirk had evaporated. Dorothy calmly stepped forward. "I came here today for a reason," she said. Her voice, though soft, carried authority that left no doubt who now held control. Chloe stumbled over her words. I don't understand. This has to be some mistake." Dorothy shook her head slowly. "No mistake. I've been a silent investor for years. As of this morning, I own controlling interest in Leclerc Fine Jewelry." Ethan's face flushed. "Why would you? You tricked us." Dorothy regarded him evenly. "No, I tested you." The two suited men took discreet steps forward, standing firm by Dorothy's side. A soft gasp rippled through the small crowd of customers who had been watching. Dorothy turned to Emma, who stood frozen behind the counter. "Emma," she said gently, "thank you for treating every customer with respect." "I noticed." Emma blinked, visibly startled but relieved. Dorothy then turned back to Chloe and Ethan. "Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for either of you." Chloe opened her mouth, desperate. "You can't possibly hold us accountable for—" Dorothy raised her hand, stopping her cold. "I can restudy you, and I will—" The tall man with the briefcase handed Dorothy another envelope. She placed it calmly on the glass counter in front of Ethan and Chloe. "Your employment with Leclerc ends today," she stated simply. Gasps filled the room. Chloe paled, her hands trembling as she stared at the envelope. Ethan clenched his fist but remained silent. Customers whispered among themselves. Stunned by the swift and decisive action, Emma stood motionless, still processing the magnitude of what had just unfolded. Dorothy let the silence speak, then addressed the room. "Leclerc Fine Jewelry stands for elegance. Yes, but more importantly, for dignity and respect. That begins today." The stunned atmosphere lingered as Dorothy turned her gaze to the employees and customers, her expression calm and resolute as the weight of her words settled over the room. The silence broke when the tall man with the briefcase cleared his throat and stepped forward. "This document has been verified by the corporate legal team," he said firmly, addressing the room. "Mrs. Dorothy Harris holds the majority controlling shares of Leclerc Fine Jewelry, effective as of 9 Imiran 1 Minario. Today, gasps and soft murmurs rippled through the customers and staff. Chloe staggered back a step, her face draining of color. Ethan stood rigid, jaw clenched, unable to hide his disbelief. Dorothy remained composed. "I had hoped my quiet visits and years of investment would be enough. I believed change could come naturally. But after what I witnessed today, I realized it was time to step forward." Chloe sputtered, her voice barely above a whisper. You set us up." Dorothy met her gaze evenly. "I gave you an opportunity to show kindness, to honor the values this company claims to represent." The man with the briefcase placed a second envelope on the glass display. "This contains documentation of multiple formal complaints regarding discriminatory behavior filed by customers over the past year." Ethan's expression darkened. "You had people spying on us." "No," Dorothy answered softly but firmly. "I had people observing. There's a difference. Integrity doesn't need to hide." The weight of her words settled heavily in the space between them. A customer, emboldened by the moment, stepped forward. "I was treated poorly last Christmas when I came to shop for my wife," the man said. "I left and never returned until today." Another customer, a young woman, nodded. "They wouldn't even let me try on a bracelet." The ripple became a wave as voices joined in, recounting small humiliations and dismissive encounters. Dorothy let them speak, her expression solemn but calm. Finally, She raised her hand gently and the room quieted. No more, she said. This ends today. Her gaze swept across Chloe and Ethan, then softened as it rested on Emma. There are those among you who understand what respect means. That will be the foundation on which we rebuild. The store remained silent, as if waiting for what would come next. Chloe's face contorted between disbelief and panic. You can't do this. I've worked here for years. Dorothy's tone remained calm. And in those years, you've forgotten the core of customer service respect and dignity. Ethan stepped forward, fists clenched. We brought in sales. We hit every target. That has to count for something. Dorothy turned her gaze toward him. You measured success only in dollars. I measure it in the experience we provide to everyone who walks through those doors. The suited man opened another document and placed it in front of Ethan. This details customer complaints directly linked to your conduct. There is no ambiguity. Ethan's face burned red as he glanced at the paper. Chloe trembled, her manicured nails tapping nervously against the glass counter. You set us up, Ethan growled. You disguised yourself to bait us. Dorothy shook her head. I gave you a chance to treat me as you would any customer. You failed, not because of me, but because of who you are when you think no one of importance is watching. A tense silence filled the store. Emma watched from her post, biting her lip, her knuckles white as she gripped the cleaning cloth. Customers whispered amongst themselves. The same wealthy clients who had once smirked at Dorothy now stared at Chloe and Ethan with quiet judgment. Chloe attempted to regain control. We deserve a warning. A chance to improve. Dorothy stepped closer, her voice unwavering. Second chances are earned, not demanded. Emma showed compassion when no one else did. She earned hers. The legal representative produced termination letters and placed them firmly on the counter. Effective immediately, he stated flatly. Chloe gasped, staggering back against the display case. Ethan stood frozen, eyes darting wildly as if searching for an escape. Dorothy addressed the room once more. Let this serve as the turning point. Every person deserves respect when they walk through these doors. That is the new standard. The heavy silence settled like a final gavel as Chloe and Ethan realized the full weight of their downfall. The tension in the store hung heavy like a dense fog. Slowly, a ripple of murmurs traveled among the onlookers. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, clutching her purse tightly. I came in last year to buy my granddaughter a necklace for her graduation, she said, voice shaking. I was told I wasn't the right type of customer. I walked out humiliated. A man in a tailored suit nodded solemnly. I've shopped here for years. I always suspected there was a coldness, but I never spoke up. Another voice joined in. They wouldn't let me browse unless I showed proof I could afford it first. The chorus of quiet confessions grew louder. Emma stood silently behind the counter, her eyes welling with tears as she listened. Dorothy gave her a reassuring nod. Customers who had been skeptical now looked at Dorothy with newfound respect. Even employees who had remained silent shifted uncomfortably, realizing the tide had turned. Dorothy raised a hand, and the murmurs faded. No one should be made to feel less because of how they look, what they wear, or what others assume about them. The crowd stilled. Dorothy turned to Emma. You have shown what this company should stand for. I would like to offer you the position of assistant store manager, effective immediately. Emma's mouth parted in shock. Me oui, monsieur. Dorothy smiled. You? Applause erupted spontaneously from the customers. Emma covered her mouth, eyes glistening, and nodded gratefully. The atmosphere shifted. Where moments ago there had been hostility and judgment, now there was warmth and hope. Even the employees who had kept their distance seemed to breathe easier. Dorothy addressed them all one final time. Today is not just an ending. It is a beginning. Let this be the place where kindness and excellence walk hand in hand. The store fell silent once more, but this time the silence carried promise, not tension. The crowd waited, knowing change was no longer a distant hope, it had arrived. As the last echoes of applause faded, Dorothy's calm gaze shifted back to Chloe and Ethan. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, still processing the finality of their dismissal. Dorothy addressed them firmly. You are to gather your personal belongings and leave immediately. Your access to company systems has already been revoked. The tall legal representative stepped forward. Security will accompany you to ensure the process is completed respectfully and efficiently. Chloe opened her mouth to protest, her voice shrill. You can't humiliate us like this in front of everyone. Dorothy's expression remained impassive. The humiliation you feel now is a fraction of what you've made others endure. Actions have consequences. Ethan sneered. We made this store money. You're throwing that away for what feelings? Dorothy met his glare evenly. I'm choosing integrity over profit. This company will thrive because of its values, not in spite of them. The suited men escorted Chloe and Ethan to the back office. The employees and customers stood in stunned silence, watching the once confident pair reduced to hollow shells of their former arrogance. Emma stood frozen behind the counter, her hand gripping the edge tightly as she watched them leave. Whispers rippled through the crowd. About time someone stood up to them, a customer muttered. I always thought they were rude, another added. As the door to the back office clicked shut behind Chloe and Ethan, Dorothy turned to address the remaining staff. Today, this store takes its first step toward becoming what it was meant to be, a place of excellence and compassion. The employees looked at one another, some nodding hesitantly, others visibly relieved. Dorothy's voice softened slightly. Those who wish to continue under these new principles are welcome. Those who cannot will be free to seek opportunities elsewhere. She surveyed the room, her gaze landing on Emma. You've already proven where you stand. Emma smiled faintly, tears still glistening in her eyes. The mood in the room shifted. The oppressive weight of fear and judgment lifted, replaced by an unfamiliar but welcome sense of possibility and renewal. With Chloe and Ethan gone, the store felt lighter, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. Dorothy turned back to Emma, her voice softening. You stood firm when others faltered. You showed grace under pressure. That is the kind of leadership this store needs. Emma's eyes widened. I was just doing what I thought was right. Dorothy gave a small smile. And that's exactly why you deserve recognition. The legal representative stepped forward and handed Emma an official document. Dorothy nodded. Effective immediately. You are promoted to store manager. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Store manager? Dorothy nodded again. You've earned it. The other employees exchanged looks of surprise, some smiling, others nodding in quiet approval. Emma's kindness and quiet diligence had not gone unnoticed. A customer stepped forward, an elderly woman with kind eyes. Young lady, I watched how you treated everyone, even when your colleagues did not. You made us feel welcome. Emma blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Dorothy placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. Say you'll continue to lead by example. Emma straightened her back and smiled through tear-filled eyes. I will. Dorothy turned to the rest of the staff. From this moment on, respect, kindness, and integrity will be our core values. Anyone willing to uphold them will have a place here. The employees nodded, many visibly relieved. A young sales associate stepped forward. We're ready to start fresh. The customers who remained began to clap quietly, a soft but growing show of support. Emma wiped her eyes and turned to help an elderly man browse the new collection, her confidence growing with every step. Dorothy watched quietly, satisfaction evident in her calm demeanor. The weight of the decision, the risk she had taken, all felt worth it as she witnessed the store beginning to transform. The atmosphere shifted once again, not with tension this time, but with hope. The first true steps toward change had been taken. As the day wound down, the atmosphere in the store had transformed. Where suspicion and fear once lingered, a quiet optimism now blossomed. Dorothy took a final walk around the showroom. The soft sparkle of the jewelry displays felt somehow warmer now, as if reflecting the shift in energy. She stopped at the counter where Emma stood helping a young couple select an engagement ring. Emma glanced up and smiled brightly before returning to her task with confidence. Dorothy moved to the exit but paused when she noticed Chloe and Ethan outside the window, standing by the sidewalk. They hadn't left immediately. Their proud facades were gone, replaced by blank, defeated expressions. Dorothy pushed open the door and stepped outside. The cool breeze greeted her. Chloe looked up first, startled. We're going, she said quickly, her voice hollow. Dorothy regarded them silently for a long moment before speaking. You lost your jobs today because of your actions, not because of who you are. Learn from this. Be better. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Do you really think people change? Dorothy's gaze softened. Only if they want to. Neither of them responded. Dorothy gave a small nod, then turned and walked back inside. Inside, the employees continued their work. Customers smiled more. Conversations flowed with ease. Emma noticed Dorothy return and hurried over. Are you all right? Emma asked. Dorothy smiled gently. Yes, everything is as it should be. The store felt lighter than it had in years. As evening settled, Dorothy stood at the front window, watching the golden lights reflect off the glass cases. The skyline glowed in the distance. A sense of closure and new beginnings washed over her. She had done what she came to do. The door chimed as another customer entered, and Emma greeted them warmly. Dorothy smiled softly and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of Leclerc Fine Jewelry. A small gathering of employees stood assembled at the front of the store. Dorothy stood at the center, flanked by Emma and the corporate legal representative. Dorothy's voice was steady. "Today marks the official start of a new chapter. We will no longer tolerate discrimination or arrogance within these walls." The employees nodded, some with tentative smiles, others with visible relief. Emma stepped forward and handed Dorothy a sleek folder. Dorothy opened it and began reading the new company code of conduct. Every customer, regardless of appearance or perceived status, will be treated with dignity and respect. 2 employees will undergo empathy and customer care training quarterly. 3, a mentorship program will be established to help junior staff grow and succeed. 4, a community outreach program will donate a portion of our profits to support local charities and artisan training for underrepresented communities. The employees exchanged surprised and approving glances. Emma added, "We've also updated our hiring practices to ensure diversity and inclusion at every level." The legal representative stepped forward and held up a framed certificate. Effective immediately, Leclerc Fine Jewelry is recognized as a certified fair and inclusive workplace. Polite applause echoed through the showroom. Dorothy smiled. "Change starts with us. We lead by example." The door chimed as the first customer of the day stepped in, an elderly woman with a worn coat and a hopeful expression. Emma approached her with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome to Leclerc. How can I help you today?" Dorothy watched from a distance as the woman's face softened with relief and gratitude. The staff moved with renewed purpose, no longer rigid or dismissive. The transformation was real. Dorothy felt a wave of satisfaction. She knew this was only the beginning, but it was the first or most important step. She walked to the center of the showroom and took a slow, deep breath. The air seemed lighter, filled with possibility. Weeks passed, and the transformation at Leclerc Fine Jewelry became evident. The once stiff and intimidating atmosphere had shifted into one of openness and genuine hospitality. Emma stood confidently behind the main counter, coaching a new hire, a young woman fresh out of design school. "Remember, we greet every guest with respect, no matter what they wear or who they are." The new associate nodded eagerly. Customers now lingered longer, laughing and chatting freely with the staff. One afternoon, Dorothy returned quietly to the store, choosing to observe unnoticed from the corner. She smiled faintly as she watched a young man in work overalls admiring a ring. Instead of being ignored, he was approached warmly by an employee offering assistance. Nearby, an elderly gentleman tried on a watch with the help of another associate, both laughing over the perfect fit. Dorothy moved to the window and gazed outside. Across the street, the reflection of the newly installed gold-lettered sign caught her eye. Leclerc Fine Jewelry, where every story matters. Her heart swelled with pride. Back inside, Emma and the staff hosted their first community event. Tables were set up with displays of student-designed jewelry from the mentorship program. Families, friends, and local artisans mingled, admiring the creativity and craftsmanship. A local news reporter approached Emma. "What sparked this incredible shift?" Emma glanced at Dorothy across the room before replying, "One person believed we could be better, and she showed us how." The reporter smiled. "Do you think this change will last?" Emma nodded firmly. "It has to. We owe it to our customers and ourselves." Dorothy caught snippets of the conversation and allowed herself a rare, satisfied chuckle. She turned to leave, content to remain behind the scenes. As she stepped outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the storefront in gold. Dorothy whispered softly, "This is the legacy worth leaving." The bustling sounds of the event faded behind her as she walked away, knowing the foundation for lasting change had finally been laid. Months later, Leclerc Fine Jewelry had not only regained its reputation, it had surpassed it. Word had spread about the transformation, and the store had become a symbol of integrity and inclusivity. The mentorship program flourished. Young artisans from diverse backgrounds showcased their designs alongside Leclerc's prestigious collections. Customers loved the new energy, drawn not just by the beauty of the jewelry, but by the warmth that permeated every interaction. Dorothy, though no longer visiting daily, kept close tabs on the store's progress. She received regular updates from Emma, who now led with quiet strength and unwavering fairness. One brisk autumn afternoon, Emma organized a special celebration honoring the store's journey. Invitations were sent to loyal customers, local artists, and community leaders. Dorothy arrived early, blending into the crowd. She watched with pride as Emma took the stage set up near the front display. Emma's voice carried clearly through the store. Today, we honor every person who dared to believe a small change could create a big difference. She turned to Dorothy, who stood at the back, trying to remain unnoticed. And we thank the one person who started it all, not with a grand speech, but with quiet conviction and action. The crowd turned, spotting Dorothy. A wave of applause erupted, genuine and full of gratitude. Dorothy gave a small, humble wave but stayed near the edges, content to watch the moment belong to everyone else. After the ceremony, customers browsed new collections, young designers proudly explained their creations, and laughter filled the once cold space. Outside, the updated window display bore a new slogan in graceful script, "Where every heart shines." Dorothy lingered for a moment longer, then turned to leave, her steps light. As she walked down the sun-dappled street, she allowed herself one last glance over her shoulder. The store gleamed in the afternoon light, a testament to resilience, change, and the quiet power of standing up for what's right. Leclerc Fine Jewelry buzzed with life. Customers chatted warmly with staff, and young artisans proudly displayed their unique designs under the soft glow of the showroom lights. The once cold and sterile space had transformed into a vibrant community hub where everyone felt welcome. Dorothy stood near the entrance, her gaze sweeping across the room. She remembered all too well how different this place had felt not long ago. Where there had been judgment, there was now kindness. Where there had been exclusion, there was now belonging. Elderly women admired bracelets with delight. Young couples laughed softly as they chose rings. A student designer nervously explained her first creation to a customer who listened intently. The store had become a place where everyone felt seen and valued. Emma moved gracefully between guests, offering assistance, answering questions, and sharing warm smiles. Dorothy caught her eye, and Emma returned a bright, grateful look before continuing her work. Dorothy allowed herself a small smile. The change she had dreamed of had taken root. She stepped back slightly, watching as a group of children pressed their noses to the display cases, marveling at the sparkling stones. Their wide-eyed wonder reminded her of her own childhood. Outside, the sun reflected off the gold-lettered sign, "Leclerc Fine Jewelry, where every heart shines." Dorothy whispered softly, "This is what happens when someone chooses to believe things can be better." She lingered for a final moment, taking in the joyful energy of the store, then quietly stepped away as the day continued to unfold around her. As the day unfolded at Leclerc Fine Jewelry, Dorothy quietly observed from a comfortable distance. The store had become a living example of what she had always believed: respect and kindness should never be luxuries. A young man in work overalls walked in hesitantly, clearly unsure if he belonged. Emma approached him with the same warm smile she offered everyone. "Good afternoon, Hamrasanam. Sir, how can I help you today?" The young man relaxed and explained that he wanted to buy a simple pendant for his mother's birthday. Emma treated him with the same care and attention she would offer to a high-end client, guiding him through the selections without judgment. Dorothy's heart lifted. That simple interaction embodied the very essence of the change she had worked to create. As the young man left with his small, neatly wrapped box, his face alight with gratitude, Dorothy stepped forward into the center of the store. The staff and a few customers noticed and fell silent, their gazes shifting to her. Dorothy spoke calmly but firmly. This store was once a place where judgment dictated who was welcome. No more. From this day forward, Leclerc Fine Jewelry will be known not just for the beauty of its creations, but for the dignity it offers every person who walks through these doors. The room remained hushed. Dorothy continued, "True worth is not defined by wealth, clothing, or status. True worth is found in compassion, respect, and integrity. That is what we sell here now, and it is far more valuable than any gemstone." Heads nodded slowly around the room. A quiet ripple of understanding passed through the staff and customers alike. Emma stepped forward beside Dorothy, her voice steady. "We will carry this forward. We will be better every day." Dorothy smiled at her. "I know you will." The moment passed without fanfare, but its weight lingered. Dorothy knew that lasting change didn't require grand gestures. It required people willing to choose decency, one act at a time. The late afternoon sun cast golden beams through the large windows of Leclerc Fine Jewelry. Customers continued to browse, their conversations soft and filled with warmth. Dorothy lingered near the entrance, watching a family select a necklace for their grandmother, a young couple holding hands as they admired engagement rings, and a student designer explaining her latest piece to an interested customer. The vision she had carried for so long had finally taken form. Emma approached her quietly. "You've changed everything here," Emma said softly. Dorothy smiled gently. "We've changed it. Together." The bell over the door chimed once more as another customer entered, greeted with a sincere, welcoming smile from an employee. Dorothy's gaze softened. She turned to Emma, speaking firmly. "The work never ends. Every day we must choose to lead with kindness, to stand against judgment, and to remind ourselves that everyone who walks through that door matters." Emma nodded. We will. Dorothy looked out at the bustling street. "If even one person out there hears this message and chooses to treat someone with dignity, it will have been worth it." As she stepped outside, the wind tugged gently at her coat. Dorothy paused and turned back to the store, the elegant sign catching the fading sunlight. "Leclerc Fine Jewelry, where every heart shines." With a soft smile, she whispered, "The world doesn't change by chance. It changes by choice." Dorothy walked away, her steps light with satisfaction. "Arui Tunamon." The narrator's voice echoed softly. If this story touched your heart, let us know. Leave a comment below sharing what kindness means to you. Like and share this story so that others can be reminded of the power of compassion. Don't forget to subscribe to Unveiled Wealth for more inspiring stories where justice and empathy prevail. The story faded gently into stillness, the message lingering with those who had listened.